I never thought I'd end up here, alone in a basement, legs swollen and stitched, waiting for anyone to show up. You see, I'm Daniel, and I've always been the one who holds things together. When there's a crisis, I'm there. When someone forgets a deadline, I fix it. When the house needs organizing, I handle it. That's been my life for years. So when I told my family I was getting knee surgery, I figured this was finally the moment they'd show up for me. Just once. They promised they would. They said, "Don't worry, we'll take care of everything." But 3 days later, they were gone. Off to Banff, sending me a text from the airport, telling me to take it easy and rest up. No food in the fridge, no plan for how I'd get around on crutches, no check-in calls, nothing. At first I was confused. Maybe they'd left some supplies somewhere I hadn't noticed. Maybe they'd arranged for someone to help. But no. I waited, and the hours stretched on. My knee throbbed, the meds ran low, and I realized no one was coming. I called Evan, my younger brother, thinking he'd at least understand. But when he picked up, it was like I was a burden. "Dude, you're fine, just chill, you're always so dramatic." Then he hung up. That's when it hit me. This wasn't new. This wasn't some rare misstep. This was the pattern of my life. Looking back, I can see all the little moments that led here. The birthdays I organized, the bills I covered when no one noticed, the endless calendar reminders I set, so the household wouldn't collapse. I kept the wheels turning while everyone else went on with their lives. And when I needed help, the entire machine ground to a halt. They didn't even notice the weight I'd been carrying. Or maybe they did. They just didn't care. What would happen, I wondered, if I just stopped? If I didn't remind them to pay the utilities, if I didn't handle the shared accounts, if I let the system fail? I lay there in bed, knee aching, heart heavy. And for the first time in my life, I let the anger rise. Not the kind you scream and throw things with. No, this was colder, sharper. The kind that rewires you. I realized I didn't want revenge. I wanted distance. I wanted freedom. This isn't a story about some dramatic confrontation. It's about what happens when the quiet one finally stops holding everything up. When the person everyone assumes will always catch the falling pieces decides to walk away. I didn't know it yet, but this was the start of something bigger than a family argument. This was the unraveling of the life I'd been stuck in, and the beginning of reclaiming myself. Before we dive deeper, ask yourself, have you ever been the one who carries the weight no one sees? Have you ever wondered what would happen if you simply put it down? Stay with me, because this is the story of what unfolds when you do. I remember one particular evening when the power flickered. I panicked, thinking maybe I'd missed a bill or something had already started falling apart. I fumbled around, heart racing, until the lights steadied again. It was a false alarm, but in that moment, I realized just how tightly I was wound. How much pressure I was still placing on myself, even when I was supposed to be recovering. I'd spent so many years anticipating problems, staying one step ahead to keep everything smooth for everyone else. And now, faced with the silence and the darkness I had to admit, I didn't even know how to sit still without worrying about them. That realization was both terrifying and liberating. I had been shaped, molded into someone who existed for others, not for myself. Every time I tried to picture what it would mean to stop, to just focus on my own healing, I hit a wall of guilt. Not guilt they gave me, guilt I'd absorbed over years, woven deep inside me. It wasn't just that they'd abandoned me now. It was that I'd been conditioned to believe I didn't matter unless I was useful. That night, I decided to test a small experiment. I turned off my phone, just for a few hours. I let the quiet fill the room, let the absence of their messages, or lack of them, settle in. Nothing broke. No emergencies came crashing down. And for the first time I wondered, what if I expanded that silence? What if I let it grow? After a few days of silence, something inside me shifted. At first it was just frustration. I caught myself thinking, how dare they leave me like this? But as the hours passed, frustration turned into something more reflective. I started mentally listing all the things I'd done for them over the years. Not to throw it in their faces, just to remind myself it was real. Because honestly, I'd gaslit myself for years, convincing myself that maybe I was exaggerating, maybe they really were trying. But the facts lined up in front of me like cold little receipts. I thought about the bills I'd handled when Mum forgot. The times I picked up Evan from the airport at 2 a.m., the calls I made on behalf of Dad when he didn't want to deal with customer service, the family birthdays I planned, the appointments I tracked, the reminders I set, all the invisible threads holding the family together, all quietly managed by me, without thanks, without recognition, just assumed like gravity. Lying there on the couch, I realized I'd been scared to name these things out loud, scared that if I acknowledged the weight, I'd have to confront how little they cared. But now left alone to fend for myself, I had no choice. I saw it all, and once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. I began keeping a little notebook by my bed, scribbling down every task I'd been handling, every responsibility I'd quietly absorbed. It was like watching a ledger fill itself up. At first, it made me angry, but soon the anger cooled into something sharper, determination. I wasn't going to yell at them, I wasn't going to beg them to understand, I was just going to stop. That decision didn't come easily. I fought with myself, going back and forth, wondering if it was too harsh, if I was overreacting. But every time I wavered, I remembered the phone calls, the ignored texts, the empty promises. I remembered the hollow way Evan laughed when I told him I needed help. I remembered Mom brushing me off like a child who was just being dramatic. So I sat there, quietly planning. I listed out the bills that were under my name, the accounts I controlled, the family systems that wouldn't run without me. And for the first time, I imagined what it would feel like to simply let them go. Not out of revenge, not out of cruelty, but out of self-preservation. I realized that I didn't need to burn everything down. I just needed to walk away. As the plan settled in my mind, I felt something I hadn't felt in years: relief. For the first time, I wasn't worried about fixing things. I wasn't bracing myself to clean up someone else's mess. I was letting the chips fall. And even though I knew chaos was coming, even though I knew they'd be furious, I also knew I wasn't turning back. I noticed little things too. Packages went missing because no one was tracking deliveries. The trash piled up because I wasn't reminding anyone to take it out. Even small household traditions, the Sunday dinner I usually coordinated, the birthday reminders I usually sent, faded into silence. It wasn't just about bills and the internet. It was about all the invisible threads that held the family together. Without me pulling them tight, everything slackened. What surprised me most was that no one outside the family reached out either. Aunt Maria didn't call. Cousin Tyler didn't check in. It was as if everyone assumed I'd still be there, quietly working in the background, keeping things stable. But now, as the days passed and nothing improved, the realization must have started to dawn on them. The person they always counted on wasn't picking up the slack this time. When they finally came back from Banff, I could feel the shift in the air. The front door slammed a little harder than usual. Voices upstairs were clipped sharp. I stayed downstairs waiting. I knew it was only a matter of time before they came looking for me. Sure enough, it was Evan who stormed down first. He didn't knock, just pushed the door open and stood there, arms crossed, eyes full of accusation. "What the hell, Daniel?" he snapped. "Why didn't you handle the bills, the internet? You knew we were away." I stayed seated, looking at him calmly. For a moment he seemed thrown off by my silence, like he expected me to jump up and apologize, to scramble to explain myself. But I didn't. Mom came in next, her voice softer, more pleading. "Honey, you should have told us you were struggling. We would have helped if we knew." I almost laughed at that. Almost. Because I had told them. I had asked for help weeks ago, and they brushed it off. But now that the consequences were hitting them, suddenly they wanted to frame this as a misunderstanding. Dad stayed back, arms folded, watching, his face tight with annoyance. He only ever got involved when things started to affect him directly. I could see the discomfort in his eyes. Not guilt, not worry, just the discomfort of a man who wanted his routine back. Evan kept pushing, voice rising. "Why are you acting like this? You're punishing us. You're making everything harder for no reason." I met his eyes, and for the first time I didn't shrink back. I didn't explain, didn't try to justify. I just let the silence stretch between us. It was incredible how loud silence could be. I realized then that I didn't owe them a big speech. They weren't ready to hear it, and honestly, I was done delivering it. This wasn't about convincing them to change or making them understand. This was about making a change for myself, whether or not they understood. Mom tried once. More, her voice tight with emotion. "Daniel, please, we're a family. We need to work together." I looked at her, really looked, and saw the pattern we'd danced through for years. She'd pull the guilt card, I'd fold, and the cycle would start again. Not this time. I stood up slowly, steady on my crutches, and said the only thing I needed to say: "I'm done." No anger, no drama, just a quiet statement of fact. I saw the shock ripple through the room. Evan opened his mouth like he wanted to argue, but for once no words came out. In the days that followed, everything started to unravel. The bills I used to manage stayed unpaid. The internet stayed down. The house, once running smoothly under my quiet coordination, turned chaotic. I could hear the arguments upstairs, the tension spilling into every room. Evan snapping at Sophie about why she couldn't handle things, Dad grumbling about missed payments, Mom running around trying to patch up the cracks with frantic energy. It was like watching a machine sputter and break, piece by piece. But down, in my space, there was a strange stillness. I no longer felt pulled to rush upstairs, to fix, to smooth things over. I sat with my leg propped up, letting the house fall apart. And the most surprising part, nothing inside me wanted to jump back in. I got messages from my parents every day. Sometimes they were sweet. "Daniel, we love you. We just need your help for a bit." Sometimes they were sharp. "Daniel, don't be so selfish. You're making things worse." But they all carried the same undertone: "Fix this for us." And every time I let the message pass without answering, even small things began to crumble. Shared grocery lists went unchecked. Plans fell through, appointments were missed. I used to be the one holding all those threads. Without me, they simply dangled. There was no replacement stepping up, no magical fix appearing. It wasn't that they were incapable. It was that they had never needed to learn, because I was always there. One afternoon, I overheard Dad on the phone with Aunt Maria. He was complaining about how everything's been out of sorts since we got back, how Daniel's acting distant. It's been a lot. I sat there listening, realizing that even now they weren't connecting the dots. They saw the effects but refused to look at the cause. There was no acknowledgement of how they'd left me, no ownership of the promises they'd broken. Just discomfort and confusion, as if this chaos had come from nowhere. And that's when it truly settled in. I couldn't change them. I couldn't force them to see what they didn't want to see. My power wasn't in making them understand. It was in stepping away, no matter what they understood or didn't. That thought used to scare me. Now it felt like freedom. In the final weeks, the house stayed messy, the bills stayed unpaid, and the tension upstairs simmered on. But down in my space, there was quiet. I'd stopped checking my phone altogether. The family messages kept coming. Bursts of frustration, attempts at guilt, sometimes moments of false cheer as if pretending everything was fine. I didn't answer any of them, and I didn't feel guilty about it. I realized something profound in that silence. They weren't really reaching out to me. They were reaching out to the role I played, the version of me that kept everything moving for them. They missed the function I served, not the person I was, and I was done being that function. Each morning, I woke up and took care of myself. Just myself. I arranged for my own groceries, I called my doctor about my recovery, I handled my needs without looping them in, and you know what? It was enough. I was enough. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was falling short just because I wasn't fixing other people's problems. Occasionally, I'd get a knock on the door, a tentative one from Mom, or sometimes even Evan, but I never opened it. I didn't need a dramatic face-off. I didn't need them to suddenly transform into a supportive, apologetic family. I wasn't holding out for an apology anymore. I was holding space for myself. One evening, I sat on the couch and let myself look through old photos. Family holidays, birthdays, moments where I'd worked so hard behind the scenes to make everything perfect. And I realized those memories weren't as warm as I'd once thought. They were built on sacrifice, on me erasing parts of myself to keep everyone else happy. And now I was finally stepping out of that frame. I didn't hate them. I didn't even wish them harm. I just no longer wanted to carry the invisible weight they'd handed me without ever asking if I wanted it. I knew the house would keep struggling without me. I knew the tension upstairs would keep rising, but I also knew none of that was mine to fix anymore. As I leaned back and stretched my recovering leg, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not the fragile peace that comes from keeping everyone else satisfied, but the deep, quiet peace of knowing I was finally living for myself. And that's how the cycle ended. Not with a blowout fight, not with revenge, but with a calm, steady refusal to play the old role ever again.